Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and we're going to be looking at the bizarre and the unknown tonight. We're just going to be looking at a bunch of weird stories and just having some fun. But first, let me show off some artwork off from my own upcoming graphic novel, Scumdogs. All right, and let me go over here. Let's try this. Yeah, I'm streaming. So here we go. Here's my extreme 90s cover. This cover I did harken back to the comic books of the 90s. It looks pretty good, don't you think? This cover is basically has all my characters in my graphic novel, and engaged in a giant, huge, well, as you can see, thing going on. They're fighting each other tooth and nail. Let's see. Scumdogs, the name of my graphic novel, is a parody book. I parody the cartoons we all know and love when we were growing up. So you're going to see characters that remind you of those long ago days back in the 90s. All right, let's get into this. The Scumdogs themselves are supervillains out to take over the world. They're led by, and you see on this cover, my two main characters, Deathmug and Buick Starpoon. Deathmug is the leader of the Scumdogs. He's the purple guy with the metal mask. He was fighting his arch enemy, Buick Starpoon, the guy with the pink pompadour hair over there. Now, Deathmug is a parody of various villains from 80s cartoons. He's an overblown, arrogant dictator out to take over the world. He's got, as you can see, he looks like various villains as well, particularly like the villains of G.I. Joe. He's got, the leaders of Cobra. Like Cobra Commander, he's got a metal mask. Like Serpentor's got gold on him, and he's purple like the Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. While his archenemy Buick Starpoon, the guy with the pink pompadour hair, he's basically a parody of a G.I. Joe parody and stuff like that, which means he and the rest of his team, because they're all wearing similar uniforms, as you can see, are all G.I. Joe parodies. But Buick Starpoon is also a space opera hero parody, because he looks like he's from a space opera, a space hero, like Zap Brannigan or Captain Kirk from Star Trek, or Buck, or Buzz Lightyear, or Buck Rogers. You hear his name, you can even see it on him, huh? Now, Buick Starpoon is an arrogant, military, overblown kind of character. He's a parody of those military types of characters that always think they're right and never take no for an answer. He's a parody of those kinds of characters. Now, the rest of his team on the Space Forces is over here. This guy with the mohawk over here, his name is Roadhog. His military specialty is that he was an army guy before he joined up with Buick Starpoon. Before he joined up with him, he was part of the army. While this bald guy with a gun down here, his name is Beach Pounder. He's another member. His military specialty is that he's a Marine, just another Marine. Well, this guy back here in the red uniform, driving that vehicle, shooting off his weapons, his name is Blast Tank. His military specialty is that he's a heavy vehicle specialist, a tanker. Looks pretty good. This is one of 3 different variant covers you'll be able to back when my Indiegogo goes live. So let me go over here. Here we have Girl Friday. Girl Friday, as I show you our artwork off and tell you about the characters in my graphic novel, is the second command of Buick Starpoon. On his team the Wild Rangers and stuff. Wild Rangers is the name of Buick Starpoon's team in the Space Forces. He leads his team against the forces of the Scumdogs that save the universe. And while they do save the universe, they're just highly destructive idiots who destroy everything in sight. So our superiors in the Space Forces assigned Girl Friday as Buick Starpoon's second in command, and she hates his guts, mainly because she thinks her career in the military is over because she's basically just a babysitter. Now we'll look at Deathmug's henchmen, because in all 80s cartoons, the main villain of the cartoon would have henchmen who would do his bidding, and these are Deathmug's henchmen. The blue, let's see, the pink guy down here is Sloppy. Yeah, the pink guy down here is Sloppy, and the blue guy up here, The blue guy with the top hat is Murder Mouth. There are a couple of idiots that do everything that Death Mug says, and they can't possibly do anything right. They just destroy everything they touch. They're a parody of every henchman from an 80s cartoon, which means they're basically just morons. Here we have Hair Metal Doctor. He's another member of the Scum Dogs. He's basically a parody of Dr. Mindbender from G.I. He's basically a parody of Dr. Mindbender from G.I. Joe, a mad scientist. But my mad scientist has been crossed over with a hair mill rocker, because I thought that'd be awesome to have. He thinks of all the gadgets and the Scum Dogs use to try and take over the universe. He does it while rocking out. Yeah, he's Hair Metal Doctor. By the way, folks, hit that like button for me because it helps me fight the algorithm, as well as please go share this video on social media. And there. Now we'll look at Miss Breasty Melons, who's basically a parody of the Baroness from G.I. Joe. But unlike the Baroness, she's a party girl who wants to have fun. Now, the Hair Metal Doctor pinup and the Miss Breasty Melons pinup will be included with other pinups in my graphic novel for you to get. But I will also get these pinups out to you from on t-shirts from Crypto Fashion to buy as well. So look out for those. So we looked at this, looked at that. Let me exit out of these and we'll look at some weird and bizarre unknown and the unknown tonight and having some fun. Feel free to leave me a few chats, folks, because I love to hear from you guys. I already have 3 likes. Not bad. Now, where to go? I saw a few good stories over here to tell you about. Mysterious Haunted Trees of the World. Let's see. Let's go to this story. All right. We all seem to live in a haunted world. The world is peppered with all manner of haunted places, forests, buildings, even dolls, and airplanes. Something beyond our experience and understanding seems to seep through into our reality and view these places and objects with some otherworldly force that tantalizes us with strangeness and at times pure, unfiltered horror. Yet, some of the most bizarre targets of hauntings and ghostly occurrences are not mere inanimate objects or buildings, but the twisted branches of the various haunted trees of the world. Yes, trees. It is in fact not such a strange notion as stories of haunted trees can be found throughout the history in a wide variety of cultures all over the world. As we shall see when it comes to ghastly paranormal phenomenon, trees can certainly rank among some of the spookiest. By far, the most famous case of a haunted cursed trees comes from the U.S. state of New Jersey, where there lies a solitary gnarled oak that has become hopelessly intertwined with a rich mythology of mystery, menace, and dark curses. The tree in question lies within a secluded, undeveloped field in the Martinsville section of Bernard Township in Somerset County, Jersey. The tree certainly lends itself to spooky stories, standing alone in an abandoned field with ancient twisted with dead branches extending out into the sky like skeletal hands. It has rightfully earned its nicknames the Devil's Tree. It is said that the infamous curse, began with a farmer, slaughtered his family, and then went to the oak to hang himself after committing his dark deed. From there, the legends surrounding this creepy tree took off, with various suicides and murders added beauty to it over the years. The area was once a headquarters, of the Ku Klux Klan. And it's said that the Klan carried out murders, hangings, and lynchings using the tree. Over time, these sinister events further situated the tree with a rich legacy of evil curses. It was said that the wicked oak hungrily absorbed the souls of those who died, in the violence it seemed to draw itself. The main rumor surrounding the tree is that anyone who disrespects it or defiles it in any way is bound to meet certain bodily harm and misfortune. That sounds less like magic and like people being killed and stuff like that, and basically in this tree being cursed, and more along the lines of the fae or the little folk. Because if you mistreat their trees, they're bound to basically harm you in return. Okay, that's a bit strange. According to the stories, one of the most offending manners in which one can defile the tree is to urinate on it. Anyone who does to be beset by great misfortune, usually in the form of a traffic accident or freak accidents of some sort. However, even merely saying offensive things around the tree has been known to cure its wrath. It is certainly a spot of high strangeness and a wide variety of other bizarre rumors surround the Devil's Tree as well. It is said that the tree exudes an unnatural warmth, that snow does not pile up around it even in the dead of winter. Another rumor is that is a rock that lies nearby, the Evil Oak, that also produces unnatural heat and has been deemed by some to be an actual gateway to hell. The tree is also said to produce peculiar sounds that if one puts their ear up to the rough trunk, they can hear various gruesome sounds such as grunts, wailing, screaming, and crying, or conversely, the perhaps even creepier sounds of children laughing or playing. Yeah, that sounds less like something to do with a murder. It could be, though, with murder and basically what humans do, and more along the lines of the fair folk, mainly because of laughing children and stuff. Perhaps even creepier of children laughing or playing. Sometimes there are booming sounds or a cracking noise said to come from somewhere deep inside the tree. Another local legend has it that if one touches the tree and then eats it at a restaurant later, their hands will inexplicably turn black. Perhaps the weirdest rumor is that some who get too close to the tree will be terrorized by a mysterious ghostly black pickup truck, which will chase them and harass them until they are well on their way away from the cursed place, after which the headlights and truck will simply vanish as if they were never there at all. The tree has also been known to draw in lightning, which seems to strike it with unnerving regularity without actually causing any damage nor causing any fires. Those who have touched the tree also sometimes speak of sudden bursts of static electricity, sometimes reportedly potent enough to knock a grown man off his feet. The Devil's Tree of New Jersey has become so infamous that many attempts have been made over the years by those who would cut down the massive oak, and its trunk holds various scars that are testament to such efforts. Yet the tree remains weirdly resistant to such defilement and vandalism. Other strange marks seem to as if they were made but not by any attempt to fell the tree, but by rather having the appearance of having been made by the claws of some large beast. The tree still stands to this day in the middle of a large desolate field and is said just as creepy as ever. There are occasional reports of noises he's seen hanging from the there are occasional reports of nooses hanging from the tree branches and even of human effigies swaying from ropes, as if they are bodies in gallows. In recent years, the tree has come under the protection of the township, and although it is open to the public, a chain link fence and fencing around the trunk now serves to keep vandals out. Devil's Tree is not the only haunted or cursed tree around by a long shot. A persistent legend is that a tree called the Dead Man's Oak, which is said to lie somewhere on the road to Cannonsville, around 18 miles south of Cannonsville in the state of Florida. The story goes that Spaniards once captured a man riding a white horse and went on to behead him underneath the tree for perceived crimes against them. The headless ghost allegedly wanders the vicinity of the tree to this day, often apparently chasing off people who get too close. The story is well known in the area, though there seems to be some disagreement as to which of the area's many oaks the actual Dead Man's Oak. I know the ghostly tree can be found near the town of Pomfret, Connecticut, located about an hour's drive from Hartford, laying on the outskirts of Pomfret in an area overgrown with trees and foliage. Is a lost abandoned village by Hoke, which has been uninhabited since the Civil War and now is mostly a collection of crumbling stone walls and other ruins. It is here in the ghost town where one can find the supposedly haunted elm tree, known for a variety of high strangeness. The origins of the village itself are somewhat murky, but it is said that it was the slaves of a landowner named John who first noticed something peculiar about an old elm standing in the village cemetery. The slaves spoke of seeing apparitions of the recently deceased, as well as weird things such as child-sized feral creatures, glowing eyes that lurked in the dark woods near the tree. In modern times, the elm tree, a burr huck, which is now just a hunk, and indeed the village itself is full of weird phenomena. It's said that the sounds of people talking, horses, carriages, and dogs barking echo throughout the desolate ruins like some bizarre trap occurring in the past. The tree is unknown for reported signs of glowing orbs orbiting it and the exceptionally creepy specter of a baby that seems to be cradled in the tree's phantom branches. New England is actually rife with the stories of haunted trees on the remote North Island. Interesting. What do you think about all this, folks? Think this is real or what? It's very interesting, strange. Oh, by the way, let me go over here. I kind of like to basically promote Comicsgate books and stuff like that. So let's go over look at Indiegogo real quick. Elvira meets Vincent Price has made $18,333. That's pretty good. Let's see. Shadow Century Book 2, Belly of the Beast, has made $10,376. Not doing too bad there. let's see. Creed Reimaginary 1 True is 2 is made $114,660. Not bad either. All right, let's see. Rainbow the Brute has made, well, for $138,007. Let's go take a look at Rainbow the Brute real quick. I want to see if there's been any updates. It doesn't look like it. Executive Beefcase editions, 1,300 of 4,000 claimed. Rainbow the Brute, regular edition, 25 used, USD, and stuff like that. Here's the regular edition. You have a choice of 3 different covers. You have the cool stuff like that. Variant cover, Mike Earthy Stallion. You can also get 2 variant books as well. Cool Story Bro for $25 and Mike Earthy Stallion for $25. Rainbow the Brute is a hard-fighting, hard-drinking fairy barbarian who battles the Thundercloud Men and maintains order under the rainbow. It isn't easy with thumb-sucking apes, commie elves, and onion grove children requiring constant vigilance. But Rainbow's worst day ever happens when, after a series of honeysuckle shots, he quarrels with one of his enemies and they manage to steal his sword from him. Not only that, but Paula Pocket, a former girlfriend whom he hasn't seen in 15 years, finds him to let him know that he has a son and the boy needs a father. Mount up on Rainbow's girthy Stallion Nephilim for the adventure of a lifetime to retrieve his sword and perhaps along the way teach a young Cheryl Pocket what it means to be a man. Rainbow the Brute is a parody satire of your memories of the 80s. It will be 38 pages long, and, well, it looks pretty good. But you can also, you have a variety of different covers you can back, and each of them looks pretty damn good. But you also have the Mike Earthy Stallion book. Mike Earthy Stallion Barn will be a spin-off book in which the baddest, beefiest stallions, Ghost Gallop, Saddleaxe, Blood Rains, is toppable. And, of course, Rainbow's own Steed, best pal Nephilim, saddle up to ride it hard against evil. Cool Story Bro as well is out there. I'd like to make a storybook, a beautiful leather-bound volume of future classics featuring high-tea parodies of fairy tales, reworked and illustrated with a toxically masculine agenda. I'm going to do my spin on Snow White. John Manley would like to do Little Red Riding Hood, and I'll invite more of the best creators to join us in filling this book with kick-ass fun. But you can also get the executive Beefcase. This is a subscription to the campaign, the ultimate way to enjoy Rainbow the Brute. If you back at this level, you receive one of every perk, plus some exclusives only available at this tier from here until we fulfill. When I say Beefcase, I should say lunchbox. This will be packaged in a beautiful, oversized lunchbox, reminiscent of the ones you used to have, but with awesome Rainbow the Brute art all over it. The perfect way to store your Rainbow the Brute perks. Limited to 4,000 pieces. These will only be available for this campaign. You'll get 1 copy of the regular edition Rainbow the Brute, 1 copy of the Kylo Rare variant edition, 1 copy of the Troyan Forever variant. We are changing the rules and adding this to our subscription box even after the 24 hours is up. You will receive the variant with your order. 1 copy of the exclusive Strawberry Love variant edition, 1 copy of Mike Earthy Stallion Barnstorm, 1 copy of Cool Story Bro, 1 of every additional regular perk and achievement that this campaign sees from here. You won't miss any of the Ashcan card stickers. Whatever. Yeah, right? Looks pretty good. It'll be found in your thing. Okay, that's Rainbow the Brute. It's made $438,007. Go back it. It's up on Indiegogo in demand. So go back it. All right. Feel free to leave me a few chats, folks. Now, we were talking about haunted trees. That's not too bad earlier. I wanted to take a break to tell you about Indiegogo real quick. Let me do this and do this. I could read this thing about haunted trees or come back to it later. There's something else I want to check out real quick. I was hoping for something more than just that. Creepy mystery of the Phantom Clowns. Whatever happened to the flying sausage-shaped UFOs? Honestly, let's look at that real quick. Because people still see them and stuff. Beginning in early 51, Edward J. Rupert, a young, witty, and overall promising U.S. Air Force officer, began his service as chief of the USAF's famous Project Blue Book. If you're wondering why I'm not finishing off the article with haunted trees, I thought it'd be more than just haunted trees, creepy trees and stuff like that, because there's a lot of weird phenomena that goes on in the woods, and a lot of it can be ascribed probably to more than just ghosts. But we're basically just haunted ghost story. If you're talking about one ghost tree, pretty much there might be differences, but maybe I'll come back to the article in a minute. I just want to basically we already talked and read a few stories about how people basically bad things happen around that tree, and now it seems to cause bad luck to people. Now, so let's go and look at something else. Edward J. a young, witty, U.S. Air Force officer, began his service as chief of the U.S. Famous Project Blue Book, housed within the Air Technical Intelligence Center. Rupert and a handful of staff would begin fielding the most credible reports of aerial phenomenon, which at the time were considered legitimate potential threats to national security. These were, of course, the famous flying saucers had been reported since the summer of 1947. UFO, Rupert would later affirm, is the official term that I created to replace the words flying saucer. The reason for this had been rather obvious. In the foreword written by, it was noted that there are a handful of types of UFO that USAF documented during the Blue Book years under Rupert's oversight. These were the triangular craft, cigars, balls of light, balls of flame. Of course, the famous flying saucer, and the Air Force's conclusion, Mizik notes, after about 4 years of dramatic study, was that this phenomenon was not the work of Russians and not the United States. That's what they said outright. Well, yeah, that's what they said and stuff. They're actually saying this was not that and stuff like that. They could explain some of it, but couldn't explain all of it. And then they basically, after that, shut down Blue Book, but continued the study of the phenomenon because these things kept buzzing people as well as their own military bases. Not anyone from this planet. Whether or not the non-terrestrial nature of the alleged craft can indeed be affirmed, it is clear that there have been far more occurring throughout the 50s and throughout the decades that would follow just as well than most conventional surveys of aviation history would indicate. In equal measure, I can hardly be argued with the number of the sorts of saucers and other UFOs that were being reported as humankind coasted along into the atomic age were in fact a terrestrial origin. Just within the last few years, the release of previously classified documents pertaining to aircraft test flights like the Oxcart program, the CIA's coding for its project for the development of the Lockheed A-12 reconnaissance aircraft, have shed new light on strange saucers seen at altitude above the American Southwest. Saucers which, well, obvious though it seems to us today, bore more resemblance to the adjacent jet aircraft most of us are used to seeing today. Okay. But that's not to say there haven't been some legitimate reports of UFOs, aren't so easily ID'd in retrospect, particularly those bearing the now famous saucer shape. Considering the following account, once again sourced from Rupert's own book on the subject, just before noon on March 19th, Charles saw a disc-shaped UFO come streaking across the sky and buzz a high-flying B-36. Lewis first saw the UFO coming in from the north, lower than the B-36. Then he saw it pull up to the big bomber as to get closer. It hovered under the B-36 for an instant. Then it went speeding off and disappeared. When the press inquired about the incident, Captain M.A. Nation, commander of the air station, vouched for his chief and added that the base tower operators had been reported a UFO to him about 10 days before. Similar non-Air Force reports have yielded fruit on occasion. In the years that would follow, in my own personal research into UFOs over the last several years, a number of witnesses have described such seemingly impossible aircraft to me. Witnesses that have come to be know quite well in terms of in many instances and whose judgment and credibility have earned my sincerest confidence. By the way, folks, if you have not hit that like button already, please do so. It helps me fight the algorithm, as well as please go hit that bell and hit the part of the bell that gives you all future notifications for my videos, as well as please go share this video out on Twitter and Facebook. Aircraft, let's get back to this article. That I have come to know quite well. Is judgment, credibility, and all that, like that. One such report was related to me. One such report was related to me in the summer of 2013 by an individual named Betty, having formerly worked as a statistician in various branches of the U.S. government. In the 80s and 90s, Betty confided to me that she had never been particularly interested in UFOs and considered herself to be a skeptic. This, however, hadn't caused her to dismiss her own observation of a classic saucer-shaped aircraft in the early 70s. As Betty describes, I must have been about 12. My brother Billy, 11 months older, was there as well. We lived in Venice, California at the time, about a mile from the beach. Anyway, one night Billy and I were outside playing around. Suddenly we stopped at a loud engine sound and looked up to see the Goodyear blimp flying about a block away heading west. We were able to clearly see the advertisement on the side of the blimp. Later, we stopped again to see a Goodyear blimp slowly flying by to the east. Every child in Los Angeles knows the Goodyear blimp. Billy and I had resumed our plane when suddenly I heard a vibrating sound coming from the right corner of the house. I looked up, and hovering close to the house was some sort of craft. Because it was so close to the house, I could only see about a third of its size in estimation. I saw the lights that appeared to go around the craft. I'm in a red and white lights. Too much time had gone by to remember for sure if there were other colors as well. As I focused in on the rest of the exposed craft, I could see what appeared to be a classic flying saucer of the 60s. There were no apparent lights on the upper portion of the craft. It was grayed in its own lighting, and from my house and street lamps against it, Billy was staring with his mouth open. I looked back at the craft and saw it slightly tilt towards us. I was so excited that just then my brother yelled, Go get Mom." I ran inside the living room and yelled to my mother, "There's a UFO," and she stared at me from the dining room with my oldest brother. I hurried there and ran back outside. By the time I returned to my spot, my mom and older brother were already there. "Where did it go?" I demanded from Billy, looking like he was shaken, and he said that as soon as they turned to go into the house, the UFO shot out there in a flash. It was extremely fast. Shot out toward the Venice Pier. Yeah, shot out towards Venice, huh? I looked out that way, but I could only see a small orbs of light, much like airplanes from the airport. There are no stars in Los Angeles. Billy and I were scoffed, and we were left to ponder over what we saw. The next day, my mother told me that the paper there were reports of unusual light seen over the Venice Pier, Venice. Right. Betty's encounters, like many that have crossed my desk over the years, supplied by clear-minded, sober individuals that, if anything, have maintained very little interest in the UFO subject, and yet in such instances the famed, if not archetypical, flying saucer shape has remained through, perhaps not prevalently. It is indeed funny in retrospect, the way that so many things that once scared us because some relegated to the lunatic fringe, like the drive-in horror movies from decades ago that scared the daylights out of us, which today we laugh at and point at the dangling bits of wiggling rubber that make up the... Yeah. But you got to understand that people were seeing flying saucers before these movies, or maybe and stuff like that, and that the flying saucers phenomenon inspired these movies to make them. People will argue the fact that most likely these things aren't real because most likely people are seeing stuff they've seen in movies and just imagine it. But you gotta understand is, why would these flying saucers actually exist? Was it before or after the movies featuring them came out? You gotta ask yourself that. Or maybe it's a good shape for a craft. To actually be a saucer shape. And that's why, basically, even though someone basically thought up the idea for a flying saucer and put it in a movie, that's why maybe aliens actually made these things real. Maybe because they are a good shape for their craft. Let's see that. Yeah, let's get back to this article. The makeup of the monstrosities that once caused us to cower. Maybe the UFOs are no different. In a sense, that only thing that could have actually been as scary as bug-eyed aliens as saucers from someplace else would have been the once inevitable conclusion. The Air Force had thought they might eventually determine that saucers had been something of our own making, belonging to the boys across the pond, who were now waving the bigger stick. That ended up not being the case, of course, but if not the Russians, whose were they? Even today, the odd disc-shaped aircraft are still reported. They appear only sparingly, almost as if just to assert themselves from time to time, or maybe to be taken as some archaic reminder of the kind of weirdness that UFOs used to be, or at least a reminder of how things were back in the good old days when flying saucer craze that swept the nation in the earliest years of the Cold War was still something new, refreshing, and enticing. Yeah, very strange. Could be that maybe they are basically used sparingly because not that they're old crap, but basically, definitely that this is most likely a spaceship. While other kinds of UFOs or phenomenon you'll see, like balls of light or maybe a cigar-shaped aircraft, they're more unusual because everyone immediately goes when they think of a UFO to a flying saucer. But that doesn't mean these creatures have stopped using these kinds of vehicles. I think they're just using them more sparingly because most definitely, when you see something like a cigar-shaped aircraft, you know it's a UFO or something like it, or the balls of light. You can't really see anything but the ball of light. You can't see any actual thing. You don't know what the ball of light actually is. Is it some sort of spacecraft or is it something else? And then the flying cigar-shaped aircraft. No one's they're not as famous as saucers. So they know it's maybe a ship and stuff. They can see that much, but they don't quite know what it is. But when you see a flying saucer, definitely you think aliens. So if these creatures do exist, or whatever's actually flying these things, they probably use their saucers less because, most definitely they know it's a craft piloted by someone, or it's just actually a craft or something. Let's go over here. Spectacular and amusing UFO hoaxes that fooled everyone. There was other stories here. Real encounters with evil imps, strange and friendly encounters with forest spirits. See, this is what I was thinking when I was going to be looking at that haunted tree thing. I think there's a good chance that it could be ghosts or it could be a forest spirit, not just elves or something like that. Maybe just a spirit that naturally inhabits woods and trees. This is why I want to go over here and see this. Throughout all of human history, the forests of our world always held a special lure. The trees have birthed countless legends and myths, as well as spawned all manner of forests. Entities and sprites and spirits. Just walking amongst the tranquil woods can feel why this might be so, as it is a place that holds an almost mystical quality to it, sometimes even seeming like a place we don't even belong in at all. Over the ages, there have been many tales of encounters with the supernatural denizens in the woodlands of the world, and here we will look at some that take on a rather frightening quality. You got to understand is that these encounters also have a lot to do with UFOs as well. Not just them being forest spirits, but balls of light, much like the UFOs that we just talked about, can basically be mistaken for whatever. The balls of light phenomenon will be flying things. Could they actually be spacecraft, or maybe there's something like this as something mystical? But then again, you also have flying saucers, and as I said, flying saucers, people still see them, but not as much as they used to. Why? It's obvious. I think it's obvious to me that's because they were trying to be more discreet. And basically, because instantly, when you think of a flying saucer or a UFO, you go to flying saucer, to spaceship. If you see a flying cigar-shaped object or a ball of light, you don't know really what it is. With the cigar-shaped object, you can pretty much see it's probably something like an aircraft or a spaceship. But you only come to it after wondering what it is first. If you see as I said, a UFO, a flying saucer, you definitely go to a craft. Let's get back to this. Over the ages, there have been many tales of encounters like that. And here we will look at some that take on a rather frightening quality to show that the forest can not only propel wonder, awe, and myth, but also fear as well. I want to get to this because, let's get into this article and see what it's about. Some of the most spectacular encounters with strange and seemingly mystical forces in the forest and stuff like that in the forest are those accounts that describe some sort of spooky wood spirits or perhaps even demons. These are those instances in which people have come across what seems to be ghostly or magical entities somehow connected to the forest, and which likely did not mean to be seen at all. From the site of your ghost stories, we have an account from a woman had her bizarre experience as she was hiking in the summertime with her boyfriend in the mountains of Italy on one of those peaceful hikes. All right. She reached the end of the trail before her boyfriend, so she decided to wait there and enjoy the tranquil scenery while she waited for him to arrive. She says what happened next. I was sitting there in the rock, and I don't know how, but I felt something was in the woods behind me. Behind me, there was a precipice, not very deep, though, and the forest would cover the end of it. And all around, I stood up and tried to see if there was something down there. That's when I saw it. I still get shivers when I think about it. Deep down there was a tree, a beautiful one with long horns. I got excited because I really see one. I was looking at, it was actually a deer. I don't know what that word is, chum. Let's call this animal. She was looking at a deer. I thought it was a tree at first. A beautiful one with long horns. I got excited because I rarely see one. And if you're wondering why I'm not trying to pronounce the name, I don't know how to say that word, and I don't want to screw it up. So we'll just call it the animal she was seeing. They had long horns. I really see one. I was looking at him from behind. His fur was light brown, and he had a black line that went from the neck to the tail, but something was very wrong with it. That's when I froze. His front legs looked like they didn't end with a normal cloven hoof, but he had 3 fingers at the end of his front legs, similar to a bird claw, but not in that shape. The back legs seemed normal. I could see it because he was walking very slowly and calmly throughout the vegetation. Then I noticed with great horror that his face seemed flat, no muzzle. I couldn't even look at him directly in the face, but I couldn't see his forehead and nose. What should have been there just wasn't. Thinking about it now, I really wish I had seen his face, just to see how his eyes and mouth were organized. He disappeared in the pine shadows, and I was still there. Shocked when my boyfriend finally arrived, I told him what I had saw, and he didn't believe me. Laughed. I know it's not scary, and it can be even funny if you think about it. A chama, was it with an eagle leg? Oh. With an eagle leg and a flat face. I thought about it all the time. We were descending. It was so weird. And at the end, I told myself that I must have dreamed it. Would love to know that I wasn't the only one seeing that thing. I'd like to think it was a deity that took the form of whatever the hell that word is, of the deer or something. There wasn't any village on the mountain's feet, so I couldn't ask if someone saw that too, or if someone knew anything about a weird animal living in the forest. It does sound like she saw Pan, the actual Pan. If you know anything about myth and stuff like that, because that sounds like what she saw. Basically a forest spirit and stuff like that. Who if you know anything about mythology and stuff like that, that's what a Pan is, because that's what I think she saw. This was obviously not the normal animal of the forest. So did she happen to come across some forest spirit or a deity? She suspects there was this all some strange hallucination. Perhaps an even odder story comes to the Reddit from another person who claims that at the time he had been in the wilds outside of Houston, Texas, in what he describes as an isolated patch of forest by a creek. He had set a hammock up that evening and was relaxing, listening to the sounds of the night when the stranger came for him. He explains what he saw. This night it was dark, like extra dark. I think the moon was covered up, but there was still enough city light to create a dim atmospheric glow, and I heard some movement, definitely coming from my way where I was in the creek, and it didn't seem as cautious as most of the other animals, which startled me. Whatever was coming my way was ballsy. I didn't think I had my knife at the time, so I think I grabbed a stick and listened quietly at the sound of got closer. It kept walking in my direction, but I could barely see a thing. Eventually, it got pretty close, and I could faintly see a silhouette. This wasn't an animal I had seen before. It was a white with long legs, too tall to be a hog, and definitely not a deer. It just stood there staring at me as if it was pissed that I was in its spot or something. I don't think I made any sudden movements or anything, but it just sat there looking, trying to figure out what it was. Eventually, it went back into the forest, and honestly, even with how much I go through those same patches of woods, haven't seen it again. I was thinking it was a wolf or a coyote, but this thing was white enough to see him in an almost pitch black darkness. And he had long legs in a real dignified manner, like he just stared at me, not scared at all, before he calmly disappeared. Yeah. That does sound weird, doesn't it, folks? Yeah, it definitely sounds weird. I ain't seen nothing like that before, and I ain't seen it since. Nor have I seen any footprints or anything that really seemed indicative of what it was. Just long legs, fur, and a really calm, white fur in a really calm, dignified manner. A really calm, dignified manner. The witness also describes feeling a sense of power and menace from the entity. One odd account comes from a Reddit poster, comes from a poster, who says that his experience happened in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. a rugged portion of the northern Appalachian Mountains of the eastern United States. He claims that at the time he worked at the Appalachian Mountain Club at the visitor center, that he would often stay there after hours. This was when he would begin to notice something rather odd in the nearby wilderness, and this would escalate into truly terrifying, he says. Every once in a while, I walked from the dorms to the main building. I would see lights up on the mountain. I usually dismissed it as some hiker or camper, and most other people did. It was a very rainy night, so I could have been hearing things or just my own paranoia. But some light seemed very close, and it bobbled up and down quickly, so I went to go see it. If someone needed help, but it quickly went in out, and I could see from my own phone light a crouching, very dark humanoid shape hunched over. I ran that noise. The next day, I asked the dishwasher, who was very close to me. He had claimed to see something similar, but no one else had believed him, as he was pretty new as well. I had about 2 months left in my work contract, so I decided to keep quiet about it. Where I live, it's around an odd old paper mill, and I had a close friend come up, and we decided to go for a walk in the woods. Across the street, it was about midnight, and being college students, we didn't care about sleep at all. The area of the woods was walked in used to be a street in the early 1900s. There's a lot of road bits, but there's one specifically that I have no better way to describe: the unearthly, damn near perfectly circular and lack of foliage around it. Again, I have no better way to describe it than it called to me. I had a weird possession to sit on this rock. Had my friend watch my back, and as he had a weird feeling about it as well. About a minute, and I had gotten a splitting headache, and as much as I wanted to get off the rock, I couldn't move. I was absorbed in something else. About another minute in, called out to my friend to see if he saw anything from, and he claimed to see a dark, hunched-over humanoid figure in one of the trees. I had to have him drag me off the rock, and we ran out of the woods. Account is interesting that it illustrates a dark trend among some of these mysterious forest encounters, in that whatever these entities are, they sometimes seem to have a malicious intent, perhaps even drawing us into their lair for nefarious reasons. And known such accounts seem to suggest that these spirits wish to pull us and take us from the reality we know, to spur us away. One report that follows the same spooky pattern is one that was given by a woman named Moria, who had been with a friend visiting a small island off the coast of Scotland called the Isle of Arran. The island itself is already rich in the lore of Celtic legends, of fairies and forest spirits, and Drewley would actually report having several encounters with such beings. However, some of these means turned out to be a rather sinister air. Yeah, a sinister feeling to them, huh? Sinister. One of Drewley's encounters happened as she was out enjoying the peaceful serenity in the spoiled island, and suddenly noticed what looked to be a procession of tall, slender entities. Wow. With dull gray hair, dressed in striped brown clothing, and surrounded by smaller dancing, covering beings described as imps. Watching them, she felt herself falling into a sort of trance-like state, and felt like an overwhelming compulsion to follow this bizarre parade into the lonely wilderness. She went along with them this days, and she says she did not remember much of the walk, but that she soon found herself in a strange new location. She said what happened next. We were soon inside a hall which looked as if it had been hewn out of rock. There was a long table where preparations for a meal had been made. Again, this imp tried to make me change my clothes, but I refused. The stripes stood very still, as if in anticipation. Perhaps they were waiting to see if I would sit at the table, which I couldn't bring myself to do. Then I heard the words, "You are the first person to come this way for 200 years. Come be with us." According to Drewley, this ethereal voice was compelling and both angelic and evil. At the same time, it sort of snapped her out of her stupor, yet she still describes the atmosphere as remained languorous and dreamy as the being stood around her, smiling, beckoning her, as she manages to find the reserve strength within her to turn away and walk the other direction, after which they vanished, and she found herself by an unfamiliar stream. Even more shocking than the mysterious encounter was that when she was able to get her bearings, bearings. Her friend, he also claimed to have met the very same entities, and they had implored him to stay with them as well. They would continue to see weird balls of dancing of light and odd mists in the forest and hear distinct bodies singing from the trees, but they would not see the strange little beings again during their stay. What were these entities, and what did they want? Even eerier would have happened to these two witnesses if they had decided to stay in the entities had asked. In another case like this, forest entities are not seen, but they still seem intent on drawing the victim away in forbidding wilds. Like other stories, yeah, this is interesting. On your ghost stories, in this account from a witness who would seem to have been beckoned by some unseen force dwelling within the woods, as he was out walking his dogs along a trail near a steep drop-off, the witness says of his spooky experience. There was a new road going through my forest made last year. I walked my dogs there a couple of times, but I never went too far until the time when I went all the way to the end of the road. There was a dead end, and after that, I had nothing but forest. There was also a cliff drop, so there was no more path. Feel free to leave me a few chats, folks, if you are enjoying this or want me to cover anything you would like me to look. If you want me to look at anything you want, let's go there. There was also so there was no more path anyone else would walk. I sat there on the first floor and was giving my dogs water when I heard someone, calling me. He or she couldn't quite recognize. Was a male or a female voice were shouting my name. I wasn't sure. Heard it right, so I stood still and waited to hear if they will say it again, and they did. They repeated it a few times, and now I was 100% sure they were calling my name. Thought it was maybe someone who I know, so I shouted back. No response. They just continued shouting my name over and over again. I eventually got up and returned home. I could still hear my name shouted as I was walking away. I didn't know what it was, and I'm also not sure if it was a person where they were. Because as I already said, there was a cliff at the end of the road, not a place where people could walk, and the shouts were coming from that direction from the forest, like someone was at the bottom of the cliff. I went down that road a couple of more times after that, and nothing weird happened. I always feel kind of uneasy there since the part of the forest is a bit dark, so I feel watched at all times, especially now since that happened. It's like I expect something is out there just waiting on me. Consider the proximity of the cliff and the origin of the voices. It almost seems as if whatever it was may have been trying to lure the witness off in the trail and off of that cliff. That what was going on here? Or was it just his imagination playing tricks on him? It is hard to say, but in a similar account, nevertheless, one more account that seems related was given by a witness of England. A couple of weird encounters with forest spirits. Some sort of started when he went out for a walk in the forest near his house one day and ended up in a clearing where he explains what happened next. Night when I arrived first, and I had to make use of a torch to get to the bottom of the hill, which looked out across a wide field. Lamented after a while, speaking my troubles to the wind, which blew back comforts at the end of my sentence. It was then that I noticed something cross the field, small pinpoint light appearing for a moment before vanishing into the darkness again. First I was about to leave, startled by someone obviously walking towards me with their phone out as a torch, but torches aren't that small or perfectly round, orb-like. Nor do they dance up into the air and fade out of existence, and no one would ever in a million years be able to walk through the slick murk without the aid of a light. So turning it on and off a single moment would be pointless and ultimately fruitless. Stayed for a while afterwards, thinking I saw it again, but couldn't be sure if it wasn't just my eyes playing tricks with me. The next time I went there with a Christmas Eve, I once again sat there, this time in the forest itself, talking to seemingly nothing but something ended a sentence with a greeting saying hello or to whatever white lived thereabouts. I was held by a guttural green back, short and clipped, rough but gurgled like a wet rock going down a stream. No one was there. I was at the center, and the looseness of the trees let me see completely 360 degrees, and as a result, was thoroughly freaked out enough to leave with a promise to come back another time. Witness in this case goes on to explain that he felt the presence he had encountered watched him to stay or to follow it, and it is hard to say what would have happened if he had. These peculiar sorts of accounts are very eerie, and in what seem to be perhaps possibly tie into the mirrored explained vanishings that have occurred. Yeah, like the missing 411 all over the world by David Polias. It makes me wonder if some sort of force energy or entity, or if the force could be luring some of these unfortunate souls in for a reason we do never understand, and are perhaps not meant to whatever the origin of these forces are, or whether they really exist at all, or whether exist. To know this, the fact that these seas of green have always had an allure and mystique to them, and perhaps harbor dangerous things beyond our knowing. Okay, that was fun. Let's go look at some other stuff. And by the way, let's go see if you've hit that like button for me. Not bad, folks. If you haven't hit that like button, please hit it for me. It really helps me fight the algorithm, so more people can see my videos. Now, maybe real encounters with evil imps. I suppose we could do that. I do like this. Throughout European legend and folklore, well, maybe I should go for a different article because we only got a few minutes left. Maybe I'll read this a bit, or maybe I'll hoaxes because that article is awful long. I might want to read it. Mystery of the Phantom Clowns. I could look at. Let's go this way. Night of the Creeps, 86 movie review. Oops, This right there. I'm trying to find here something let's look at. Just a moment. Now, let me do this over here real quick. All right, let me do this. The Brian Scott abduction files. Take a real quick look at that. It's an awful long article as well. Hoping for us because we don't got much more time left. I was hoping for something to get this done quickly. But what do you think about what we've seen and read tonight, folks? Well, with the 100 trees, sound very much like the 100 tree. What we read, the 100 trees and stuff like that, sound very much like they could be aliens as well. Seeing orbs or strange figures and stuff like that, or maybe even forest spirits. And the forest spirits themselves, they have a lot of. It just shows you that a lot of these weird paranormal stories basically have a lot in common with each other for some odd reason. So whatever the reason it could be, it's very strange. Let me find a shorter article. 100 Roads, their paranormal encounters, chilling legends from around the world. It's an outrageous side of UFO culture. Let's see. Look at that. But whatever it could be, like aliens or stuff, do these entities actually talk with each other? Or do these entities all share similar powers to each other? I mean, some of them are from outer space, if we hope. Some of these things could be from our world, but we've never met them before. They're just a non-human species. So whatever could it be? But they do seemingly have similar abilities to each other. Or whether the aliens can do things with UFOs that seem really very similar to what people have encountered with other strange phenomenon. So there's that to consider as well. All right, I think I'll look at that abduction case, the Brian Scott abduction files. Their apparent alien abductions, Brian Scott, are as intriguing as they are bizarre. And while I probably won't read the whole article here, just take a look at it. And perhaps should be taken with a pinch of salt at the ready. There are many witnesses who have gone on record as witnessing strange and even malicious events. The last part, perhaps important, is we will examine a little later that there are many incidents throughout history where people have received special powers, forces unknown, in order to to do things. Indeed, in many esoteric circles, what we refer to as alien abduction to them is a visitation from entities from the spirit world. It may yet prove to be the case that these two different takes on the event on what happens are indeed one and the same. Indeed, huh? One, huh? The case was subject to investigation by respected UFO researcher Timothy Green Beckley, who incidentally has broached such subjects as ever-present connectivity between our other paranormal events across many fields, including ancient religions, esoteric writings, and UFO encounters across the ages. He would speak of Scott extensively. All right. with basically talking with him about what was going on. Beginning in February 1976, only months after his last experience, it was from these initial interviews that Scott and Connors would enter the public arena. Brian Scott's encounters be but a tiny piece of the big and apparently cosmic picture of the human experience, stretching across time and location, every facet of our collective existence. Some sort of communication while returning home. While Brian Scott was first apparent abduction occurred in 1971, he would later reveal his belief that his first experience of these strange entities was over a decade earlier, 16th birthday, 12th October 1959. On that evening, on his way back home from celebrating his birthday, his dog walking along with him, he would suddenly notice a bizarre, strange ball of light less than a foot in diameter, seemingly hovering over the top of his canine friend. The more he stared at it, the more it appeared to be in makeup, with the middle of the orb appearing significantly sturdier than the edges. It appeared to be it appeared to be translucent and not exactly there, but almost like it was like a ghost. So it was basically, he says that this orb appeared to be that you could put your hand through it and stuff. I know there's another word there. I'm just not saying because I wanted to be a little more cool and basically was saying this and stuff. It's what he said is semi-solid in makeup, with the middle of the orb appearing significantly sturdier than the outer edges. There's that as well to consider. Or it could be, as I said, ghost-like. As he continued to watch these most bizarre events unfold, the glowing orb approached him, settling with a hovering once more. This time it might be in front of his face. With no warning it would this time in front. It would Then, with no apparent warning whatsoever, it shot straight upward and vanished out of sight in a matter of seconds. Okay, so you get this. As he stood there trying to make some kind of sense and reason out of the mystifying incident, he got the distinct impression that some sort of communication had taken place. Strange thoughts and pictures had appeared in his mind, thoughts that weren't his own, and what's more, it was with equal conviction. He believes the orange ball was responsible for the otherworldly telepathic words and stuff that were going on in his mind. Scott wouldn't experience any further strange or bizarre episodes. That was until 12 years later in early 1971. Double abduction from the deserts of the Superstition Mountains, 1971. Should I read this, folks? We're coming to the end of this thing, but you can see I can always go into this article further about this guy later on. But you can see these events basically are all very strange and all very similar to each other. But then again, maybe I want to read a little bit more of that. Let's go to what he said there, because I'm curious. Yeah, because it looks cool. On the evening of 14th, 1971, Scott, along with his friend Nick Corbin, would drive to the open desert near the Superstition Mountains just outside of Phoenix, Arizona, where it was really particularly strange to Scott, both then and now. Both then and now, was he had no idea why he was driving out to this part of the desert, other than that he felt that he would find an ideal place for target shooting. In a similar frame of mind, he would suddenly pull over his vehicle with both men exiting and staying at the side of the road. They both scanned the area, with Scott looking up at the sky as he did. A strange craft moved overhead into his field of vision. He would later describe the craft as oval and glowing, much too large to be a conventional aircraft. It also had a funny kind of glow to it. Similarly, the craft would head toward Brian. His mind told him to turn and run and take cover. However, before he could move, the craft was directly overhead. So large was the craft that when Scott looked up, he could no longer see the sky. Then a pulsing, pulling feeling took hold of him. A presence hidden in plain sight. Sight, huh? The next thing he knew, he was moving directly upwards off the ground, somehow trapped in a huge beam of light. His senses went into a confused overdrive, a combination of the warm Arizona air mixing with the apparently cold air leaking out of this huge otherworldly craft, mixed with a beautiful, frightening view of the lights of downtown Phoenix. Took hold at once. Took hold of him, huh? Within moments, though, he was inside the otherworldly vehicle. Scott moves his focus around the interior of the craft. He was more than amazed to find Nick already on a world seemingly waiting for him. Incidentally, we have examined previously how the the entire Arizona region is awash with strange going-ons and even claims of abduction by reptilian creatures that inhabit the caves of the mountains. Given Scott's descriptions, which we are about to examine, these claims are perhaps a little more interesting and potentially corroborative. What's more, stories of portals and star people going back centuries to the natives who called the area home for hundreds or perhaps thousands of years upon settling of America, the 15th centuries, are in abundance. It is just a coincidence then that such a strange incident, if we accept it to be true, would unfold there also. Horrifying creature. Before the mind and physical examinations, horrifying creatures. Before their minds could process what was going on, Scott and his friend were moved into a small room, rather ominously at least, to the two increasingly frightened men. This strange room contained a strange mist of fog. Then the door exploded open, revealing an even worse proposition. Within this mist were several very horrifying creatures. These monstrous entities, a crocodile, a rhino-type gray skin, thick patch of hide over their front torso. Scott also later described them as a combination of earth animals that stood at least 7 feet tall. Furthermore, they did have a thumb on each of their hands, contained three long claw-like fingers. Yeah, their hands had a thumb, and they had three claw-like fingers. Huh? Oh. The two men were stripped of their clothes and led away to a different location. Scott had the distinct feeling he was floating or was somehow, being brought to his destination. Once there, he would undergo a physical examination during which he was straining to the wall of the room as if by an invisible force. In the middle of this menacing room was a pole which ran from the floor to the ceiling. This is another detail that surfaces in other such reports. On this pole was a strange box that seemed to direct an intense beam of light towards him. One of the strange and menacing creatures stood near the box, seemingly manipulating it. As he watched the creatures in the mist, he noticed how the foggy substance would soak into the creature's skin. By this time, the box on the pole was placed on the floor, and coincidentally, the lesser beam was aimed at his feet. He would later recall that simultaneously he could feel a sensation of warm and cold fluids running over his lower limbs. Then the light moved to his eyes. I will tell you, and I will show. Huh? As the light reached into his mind, he felt a severe headache. As the light reached into his mind, he felt a headache in his skull. At the same time, there was a strange numbing location grip in his mind. Then the light went out, and the creature manipulating left the room almost instantly. Another creature would enter, and this one was significantly taller than the others. Scott would estimate to at least 9 feet in height. This behemoth of an entity made its way directly over to where Brian stood, to the wall. When he was basically glued to the wall. It reached out and placed its hand on his head. Instantly, a rush of thousands of thoughts spilled into his mind all at once. Without thinking, Scott asked who they were, and what they wanted with him. And his friend, the towering figure, replied, with him and his friend. He replied with, however, the speech was slurred and extremely quick, meaning Scott couldn't understand it. Then the creature replied again, at this time much slower and seemingly purposely under control. More importantly, it was in perfect English. First of all, the creature would state there will be no pain. As the words were spoken in a bizarre, almost prophetically religious way, any ounce of pain drained out of his body. Despite being aware of this malicious transformation taking place throughout his body, he continued to demand to know who the creature was. The creature replied, I will tell you, and I will show you. I will tell you. Then the walls of the craft melted away, and holographic visions of domed cities from the world far away filled his sight. Would later describe the experience along the lines of mind transportation. True form hidden behind a projected cloak a projected cloak, huh? This again is an interesting notion, as one that several alien abductees have referred to other accounts, perhaps one of the strangest being the encounters of Marine, who at one stage during her experience was seemingly mentally abducted, where her physical and self remained in the car with investigators. Furthermore, some of the other details of Petty's encounters mirrored those of Brian Scott. For example, she would also begin receiving telepathic messages following her first encounter in the summer of 72. Further still, these messages urged her to be at very specific meaning points. To meaning points, huh? The creatures would explain that he was, the creature would explain that he was looking at visions of their homeworld. There were great domed cities, a terrain that looked drastically different to Earth, according to the creature. The planet was the victim of an airborne virus that wiped out many of the population and caused a mutation among the others. The creature then offered that the image that Scott was not their true form. They instead projected a cloak of sorrow, all who saw them in memory of their fallen population. The cloak also served as a biological shield against any further viruses. Suddenly, the holographic image melted away, and Scott found himself back on the ship. However, this time, whatever was restraining him had given up its grip, and he was free to move around. He looked up and saw that the creature was making its way out of the room. Once more, Scott asked who. The creature turned. The creature, huh? I left the veil projection. Voltor, it was his name. Okay. He named himself Voltor. Scott looked out and saw the creature's true form was a very human looking around 7 feet tall. Human looking around 7 feet tall with long red hair. Perhaps the most striking feature, though, was the piercing blue eyes. On the ground with quickly fading memories. After Voltar left the room, several of the other creatures came and escorted him back to the point where he had first entered the craft. Nick stood there and also stood next to what Scott realized, was what he was wearing. He would dress quickly before being lifted into the air and fled back into the ground. He looked around, suddenly confused, disoriented. However, in spite of this delicious mental state, his memory of what had just happened was clear and precise. As he walked around the desert floor at the side of this lonely road, he located his torch. He dropped earlier when the purple light ensnared him. He picked up the torch and walked towards his car. When he turned the radio, he discovered it was just after 11 p.m. He and his friend had been away for just over 2 hours. The drive home would take him at least an hour, even at this late hour. By the time Scott finally arrived home, his memories of the encounter had almost initially vanished. All he could really recall was of first witnessing the strange craft in the sky. It would be some time before he managed to unlock those memories. However, almost 2 years to the day, 22nd of March 1973, he would find himself traveling back to the spot of the abduction. Upon arriving there, he would claim to meet a human entity. Host was what was communicated to Scott from this mysterious figure is not known. However, according to his reports, after contacting UFO researcher in 75, he was subject to, the abduction encounters of the evening of 25th October 1973. Furthermore, he would suffer further abduction events 21st November 1975 and again on 22nd December of the same year. Hypnotic regression and voices. It was after his initial reports to investigating researchers, October 1975, when Scott first underwent regression. The session would take place at Anaheim Hospital under the charge of Dr. McCall, of the doctor, right? Anaheim Memorial Hospital, During the season, Scott would recall the details of his first two abductions encounters. However, during this retelling, he would begin to speak in a bizarre, unnerving, mechanical voice. What's more, when this strange voice was examined, it was found to be produced an exact 1,000 decibels per second as an oscillograph. Such sounds should not be able to be produced by the vocal cords of the humans or animals. During these initial meetings and sessions, many experts and representatives from various UFO organizations and other paranormal groups, and with many people who come to interview and investigate Brian Scott's encounter, come many different theories, claims, and points of view in order to attempt to explain his experience. However, one of these investigators would prove to be of more influence than many of the others. Evidence of persistent paranormal activity. 2 months following December 1975 abduction incident, Tim Green Bickley became involved with the case. He would immediately begin by asking asking Scott about any paranormal or poltergeist type activity in the home. As we have examined before, many alien abduction encounters, particularly repeat abductees, often begin to announce themselves through repeat incidents of paranormal happenings. The response is intriguing as it was chilling in parts. Scott would speak of white light, streaks of light, balls of light that would make their way through his house of their own accord. Even stranger was the pure flashes, as if someone had placed a flash cube immediately in front of his face. Perhaps the most bizarre, though, was a brown-shaped thing that has from time to time, brown-shaped thing that has from time to time shown up. It dashes around the room in crazy directions, and every time that it does, it creates some damage to the home. All the electricity and all the circuits in the house have melted, frozen, and burned up. On another occasion, Scott's wife, Marla, would end up in such a confused state that she would end up in the hospital. She would return home early from work after feeling suddenly unwell. However, with the minute she became confused and disoriented, and furthermore, she began uttering bizarre words, disoriented, and furthermore, she began uttering bizarre words and sentences that confused her further. Then she would claim that while in the bathroom washing, she had suddenly felt hands all over her body. She was convinced that an invisible person had broken into the house. She would eventually calm down and describe what she had witnessed in more detail. Her description matched the sudden memories of the alien entities from the March 1971 abduction that unsettled him. He had not spoken to her in such detail about the encounter, an unnerving demonstration of power. Okay. After taking Marla to the hospital and make sure she was not in any immediate medical danger, the couple would return home. However, several hours later, she would collapse and begin to hyperventilate. By the time paramedics had arrived on the property, she had become completely hysterical. It would ultimately take 4 paramedics to restrain her and bundle her in the waiting ambulance for further examination. However, when Scott returned to the house and made his way to the room where their 1-year-old baby's playpen was, he was shocked to find the baby was no longer there. Immediately on the edge of panic, he began rushing from room to room, searching for their young child. Then he noticed their pet dog barking steadily at the back door in the property. He opened it, and to his shock could see the young child sat in the corner of the patio. How it had managed to get out of a playpen specifically designed as they are to keep babies in, and then managed to get out of a locked door remains a mystery. As strange and unnerving as the experience doubly was, however, one of the strangest aspects of Brian Scott's experience were the continued encounters with the host. Suggestions of links to ancient gods. Scott, the host, was a regular visitor to the house. It would communicate to him. The host was a regular visitor to the house. It would communicate to him in a computerized language. More specifically, he would say, the voice seems to come to me, an inner voice that is not mine. The entity says that I am one with it. That I am one with it. Perhaps even more bizarre, however, was the evening where Scott suddenly began speaking in a foreign language, a language they would later find out was Greek. He had never spoken Greek in his life previously. The outburst was surprising to Scott as it was to his wife who heard it. Furthermore, he would begin writing with his left hand, despite being right-handed backward in Greek. Once more during these experiences, a strange voice began talking to him and his wife, who asked him who was speaking to them. The ambiguous reply came back that it was Ashtar. Even more bizarre, Ashtar would speak directly to Marla as if to prove its authenticity. This mysterious voice would speak to her of moments from her past. Only she could have known. Only her from her past that she would know. Okay. Then events would take another unsettling twist, one that would further forge the unlikely connection between events from the other side and events from elsewhere in the universe. Ashtar would begin to offer Marla riches and all the money in the world. That was it. It is exchange for her soul. An exchange, huh? As we mentioned previously, Beckley is one of the last voices in terms of such apparent connections. He would point out that Ashtar was remarkably similar to Ishtar, a goddess of an ancient goddess. of Babylon. Well, a goddess of ancient Babylon? A goddess, huh? Extreme vibrations attracting, well, various entities. What Beckley would also offer was that as opposed to such, that maybe this is more than one entity going on, maybe more than one paranormal phenomenon, huh? Ghostly visitors being the same as the apparent extraterrestrial abductees, they may very well be separate entities in their own right. And ones attracted to the location due to the extreme vibrations are caused by the Scots' ongoing cosmic encounters. It is certainly an interesting suggestion, and that one deserves continued. Yeah. It also is basically, it's interesting that basically all these paranormal encounters we talk about also seem to have aspects of each other. How all of this can basically be linked, how all these different phenomena can be linked together. Aliens feel like they can be gods, or ghosts can basically seem like something we see from that can seem like something that would not possibly have anything to do with ghosts. How basically these entities, these humanoid creatures can basically look like, well, fairies or aliens, or maybe just ultra terrestrials, or fairies and stuff like that. There's also, now let's get back to this. So it's certainly an interesting suggestion, one that deserves continued, thorough, widespread investigation. There's, after all, persistent evidence of an intertwining of, well, such bizarre phenomenon. While such research will unlikely result in a definitive, all-encompassing answer to the UFO and alien question, well as ultra-terrestrials and other things as well, or rather just UFO and alien question and ultra-terrestrials, or indeed to such equivalent unanswered questions, paranormal fields, it will certainly, well, now let me reread that again, huh? UFO and alien question, or indeed to such equivalent unanswered questions in the paranormal fields, it will certainly push the boundaries. Yeah, the most of what we know of the world. That is true. Let's see. Beckley would also speak with researchers who were local to the area and already familiar with Scott's case, in particular some of the contracts that would claim to be entities from elsewhere. Many of these were recorded on tape. One particular chilling one would be Beelzebub, the devil himself. Incidentally, many of these tapes were subject to examination for evidence of tampering or a hoax. Nothing at all would suggest such a manipulation had taken place. Furthermore, all of the voices that claimed to be different entities were also drastically different in terms of their analysis. In short, it would appear that they were different people who were speaking. Despite this, Beckley would comment on how much of the information offered bordered on juvenile in content and delivery. He would further comment that despite the apparent quantity of the messages, there's very little substance to them. A temporary elevation of consciousness. Ultimately, it was Beckley's belief that Scott was not making up the voices of his own free will, and that the point was repeated that several of the voices were at a tone so low that it was not thought possible a human voice willingly or knowingly to speak at such a level. Furthermore, events would similarly continue in the months that would follow. For example, the contact Voltar had claimed he would reappear in Toronto and Bolivia. He would transfer more messages and consciousness to Scott. Interestingly, upon returning, Scott was seemingly a completely different person. No longer did he chain smoke, for example. Was his perceptions and knowledge on a whole range of subjects limited? He could now seemingly speak well. Nor was his perceptions and knowledge on a whole range of subjects limited. He could now seemingly speak, well, comfortably about a whole range of issues, subjects. While this transformation would not be permanent, in several weeks he would return more to his normal self. It was very noticeable. What might be the purpose of such a temporary change of mental ability and perception have been? What could Scott have achieved within those few weeks, and just how discreet was his real mission? Of course, we accept this account to be true. That's if you accept this, if you accept any of this to be true. Even stranger, the entity, the host, would claim that it would reappear on the Spider, Nazca Lines in 24th, 2011. According to his claims, at this stage, instructions would be given to Scott and other contacts for further activities. Of course, Brian Scott had since passed away. Whether any other contacts have been put in place to continue such work is not known. Of this, he asked of a sign given. Let's see this. Very interesting what we're reading here. Perhaps one of the most bizarre encounters would take place. Presence, researcher, and eventual close friend of Brian Scott, Jim Frazier. Early hours of 23rd August 1976, he was more than happy to write a book of Brian's experiences. However, he first wished for some kind of demonstration of the genuineness of Scott's apparent contact abilities. According to Frazier, at 10 a.m., Brian began to speak in the bizarre and clumsy way of the host. Message in full would state. The message in full would state. The host opened run one. From the sky now comes a ball of fire for all mankind. The host open run one. From the sky now comes in a ball of fire for all mankind. To see this, of this 1,000 particles of this I am, look to the west, given in trust, let it 3801 North Long, 11950 west of this week of I of this, yes, of I, a sign given. Okay. Frazier would further write that around 20 hours later, a ball of fire was witnessed in the western skies, apparently sparkling like 1,000 bright lights. Furthermore, according to many of the reports of the news wires, this fireball would eject particles from Canada all over the continent and stuff like that. Even stranger, larger than these particles would land within 10 miles of the coordinates given by the host. It was certainly enough to convince Frazier of the authenticity of Scott and the situation as outlandish as it undoubtedly was. Both were bizarre and strange things. Years there were many people who were witnesses to strange and bizarre incidents involving Brian Scott. These would include such strange cases of automatic writing, intricate drawings of advanced science and technologies that he otherwise knew nothing about, as well as detailed information about the history of humanity. Often these writings would be in ancient languages, much like the aforementioned incident where he would begin writing in Greek for no reason at all. Interestingly, and perhaps importantly, many of these ancient writings reportedly point to an important link, a link between our contemporary world and that of those from antiquity. Interesting right there. How much more of this do I got left? Okay, not that much more. All right. Might it be then that Scott and many who have researched the case believe that the encounters are proof of extraterrestrial beings or ultra-terrestrial beings? Even more outlandish are such incidents of spoon-bending, of the ability to read people's minds. In short, despite Brian Scott being a remarkably ordinary man, he managed to perform some amazing and otherworldly feats, bizarre links to the esoteric teachings. Let's quickly turn our attention back to the orange ball of light that first appeared to Scott on his 16th birthday. Was this strange glowing orb some kind of reconnaissance device sent to prepare Scott for a lifetime of intergalactic missions for the sake of humanity? Far-fetched as those kinds of theories sound, it almost puts Scott and several others like him in a category of modern-day preachers, wise men, and chosen ones. It is also perhaps worth mentioning that reports of these strange orbs have seemingly exploded in recent years around the United States. Of course, such strange orb lights have been reported in the Australian outback for decades. Might these also be such a bizarre aliens and interdimensional devices sent to seek out certain people chosen for special missions on Earth? We should perhaps once more turn our attention to the esoteric world for a moment. If we believe that some of this information was leaked from the lodges that contain such secrets, histories according to such hidden information, secrets, full of such mysterious entities from the spirit world. Sole purpose was to influence world events through specially chosen humans, according to such esoteric teachings. Such great people from history, as well as lesser known figures whose contributions were equally important, were influenced by such shadowy figures. If such teachings are true, we have to ask, for what ends and whose benefits are those interventions taking place? A genuine case of persistent extraterrestrials. Okay. So where should be the claims and accounts of Brian Scott reside in the overall picture of UFO history? And are accounts of the extraterrestrial nature, or might they prove to be an incident involving a chosen individual, cosmic contact between humanity and intelligence and energy elsewhere in the possible vastness of the universe? As we experienced with Brian Scott, like those of Billy Mayer. For example, Mayer is often a contemporary version of George Adamski, who, despite quite obviously manipulating and even manufacturing his later claims, is also seen as being a genuine contactee in the first instance. If so, what is the purpose of these contacts? Are the apparent missions, and do they take place in the background to world events, or are they somehow foiled by forces unknown to us? Indeed, the questions and speculations we could go through are endless at this point. There is no doubt that the deeper we collectively dive into such accounts and theories over the years years to come, more and more questions will surface before we reach where we need to be. And one point of contemplation, where would such accounts stand in the overall course of history? Might such accounts of contact and persistent communication with people such as Brian Scott in our contemporary era be the same as any number of figures from ancient texts and religious writings who had apparent contacts with angels and entities from the spirit world? There are many different angles we could examine about this case. Account from and it might prove that indeed. It might prove that we indeed we have to step into other fields of interest and even different ages before we get a full understanding of what is going on with UFOs. Okay, interesting. That was a good bit of that was good, huh, folks? Whew. Now I'm going to end this right here. Please go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics; they're bad for you. Okay, all right. Make sure remember there is misspelled. Make sure you're still subscribed. Hit that like button because it helps me fit the algorithm so more people can see my content. As well as please go and hit that bell. Hit the part of the bell that gives you all future notifications for my videos. Leave some comments down below because I love to hear from you guys. Go share this video on Twitter and Facebook. As well as please go over to Stitch Together Pics. Stitch Together Pics is a YouTube channel that deserves far more subscribers. You're going to love the host on this site. He does some great content. So go and subscribe to Stitch Together Pics, as well as go over and subscribe to Creepy Little Book. Creepy Little Book is like the Art Bell radio show. He does little videos talking about high strangeness, but he also does live streams every night. On weekdays, he live streams at 12:30 a.m. and on weekdays on weekends he basically live streams at 10 o'clock p.m. Go and subscribe to Creepy Little Book. Also, please go over and subscribe to my BitChute channel. The name of my BitChute channel is Comic Freak. Remember, folks, I'll be back again tomorrow around 11 o'clock p.m. for another live stream, so be sure to come back again then. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me.